Hey guys, how are you doing today? Welcome to Tarot Tuesday. Thank you all for choosing to join me. Today we are going to be talking about divination. Specifically, we're going to be discussing runes and tarot. And we'll discuss a bit about what these divination systems are, how to read with them, and at the end, we'll kind of talk about how do you decide which divination system might be best for you to start. So that's the plan for today. And if you are new here, welcome. I've been doing a lot of live videos on YouTube lately. Of course, I do Pagan Happy Hour every Friday at 5 Central, where we discuss a different pagan topic. And I've also started to do Tarot Tuesday once a month on my channel. And Tarot Tuesday, on weeks that I'm not doing a live like this on my main channel, me and my friend Jamie, we are the creators of our tarot deck, the Key Tarot. We'll usually do a live on Instagram or, a post or something like that on Instagram. So you can, of course, stay tuned for that. But these have been fun. And I'd love to hear from you guys as well. If you are also tarot enthusiasts or rune enthusiasts, if you do like the idea of making Tarot Tuesday something more regular on my channel, let me know what your thoughts are on that. But in general, thank you so much for joining me today. I do actually have a drink because going live on YouTube is a bit intimidating, and I find it's always a little bit easier with an old-fashioned in hand. Today we're talking all about divination. And I wanted to start with two of the most popular divinatory methods, as in runes and tarot. Now, eventually, maybe I might discuss, tessiography, which is like tea reading, or reading from bones, or like reading from mirrors. There's a lot of different divination systems out there. But let's start with the basics here. So I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments if you work with runes, if you work with tarot, if you work with another divination system, or if you work with multiple divination systems. So let me know in the comments what system you personally prefer. I did a poll earlier on my YouTube community page, and it turns out that many of you guys are into tarot, which is awesome because that's my preferred divination method. So that was really cool to see. But I'd like to hear from you as well in the comments. And I'm going to be looking at the comments. I'm going to be bringing your thoughts and ideas into the conversation. So do please feel free to share your ideas here. And if you are new to my channel and you like these live videos I do, there are several different ways you can support my channel. I do have a Discord that I run through my Patreon. So if you are interested in finding a tarot or a pagan community, you can check that out at the link below. Another great way to support the channel, as it is Tarot Tuesday, is if you are a deck collector. I do have my own deck that I released earlier this year called the Key Tarot. So I have that link down below. And the last way you could support the channel is through Super Chat. Since there are a lot of comments coming in and they move pretty quickly, if you do a Super Chat, which is a donation, you click the $ button at the bottom of the chat, I'm going to see your question pop up really big, and I'll be sure to answer it and address any thoughts and ideas you have. So let me see, looking at your comments here, I see that it seems to be a good mix. Some people seem to be working with both runes and tarot. I see many of you guys are just now starting to read runes, which I am still a novice in rune reading, so I'm in the same boat there. I see some of you guys love collecting both runes and tarot. Let's see. Yeah, so it seems like most of you guys are interested in both divination systems, which is really fun. And in this chat, we're going to talk about the pros to tarot, the cons to tarot, and the pros and cons of runes. So you can kind of see what divination system you might want to invest more time in, or which system you feel might be easier to connect with. So that's what we're going to chat about. Let me have a sip here and we'll get into it. So let's see. Now, first, I think it's good to just say, why even bother, right? Why bother using a divination system, and what is divination? Well, I think for the most part, when you hear the word divination, you're thinking, oh, this is something that can help show me the future or tell me something about the future. But in my view, divination is much deeper than just something that can give you insights into the future. I think it can really uncover a lot of inner wisdom that might be obstructed from our conscious mind, and divination can help pull that out. Oh, I see we have a super chat here from Selena. Thank you so much. She says, I collect rune sets, and she uses different ones for different situations to fit this situation. Rose quartz for love, etc. Yeah, that's a really fun way to incorporate different types of stones, since runes are usually stones or wood pieces. You can really bring in a lot of the properties of those stones or natural materials into your rune practice. So great point. And thank you so much for the super chat there, Selena. So when we think about divination, so yes, I personally do think it can help give us insights into the future. The main purpose, in my view, of divination is to help bring what's within the subconscious into the conscious mind, right? So if you're familiar with like Carl Jung, you're probably well aware of the subconscious. And a lot of our true desires, hopes, and fears exist within the subconscious. And often they are suppressed and we can't fully understand them because our conscious analytical mind gets in the way. So divination is, in a lot of ways, a tool to bypass the logical conscious brain, to dig down into the subconscious, pull out little nuggets of wisdom, and bring them out so that we can interpret them and really understand what we truly want out of life. And that can be something really beneficial for so many areas of our life. And so for that reason, I think divination can be so powerful and such a great tool for self-growth and self-discovery. Now, it gets a bit more interesting when you're doing a reading for someone else, because you have to then tap into not your subconscious, but their subconscious, right? So in my view, I believe in something called the collective unconscious, which is another theory that, comes from Carl Jung and several other psychologists, where we kind of all have this collective realm that we can tap into. So as a reader, whether you're a rune reader or a tarot reader, if you're doing a reading for someone else, what you're really trying to do is to tap into the person that you're doing the reading for, their collective unconscious, their subconscious, so that you can pull little nuggets of wisdom out and help them through their own journey. Now, a lot of people do readings and call on the power of spirit guides. That's not something I do very regularly, but I know a lot of readers find great success in that. So there is a lot to divination. It is so much more than just telling the future. And you can totally believe in divination, believe in tarot and runes, even if you are extremely scientifically minded. When I think about how tarot tells the future as well, or how runes can tell the future, it gets kind of interesting, because say you are, you have a question in mind. Say, your question is, should I leave this job and start this new career path, right? And you do a rune reading or a tarot reading. By the mere fact of you doing that reading and seeing what comes out, just the fact that you did that reading and saw what showed up is going to change the future. So the act of doing the reading itself is changing the future. So it gets kind of wild and crazy when you think about it that deeply. But I just wanted to say there's a lot to it. And tarot and rune reading is really a lifelong practice where you can build these skills over time. It's not meant to be something you learn in a weekend and then you're good to go, or like one quick workshop and you're good to go. This is really a lifelong practice for self-growth. So those are kind of just my basic theories on, how divination works. What is it? How does it all fit into telling the future? Let me know your thoughts on those ideas. Let's see. Checking your comments here. Joanna says, my aunt used to do divination with playing cards too. Yes, you can do that. A tarot deck, if you take out the major arcana and just work with the minor arcana, that basically equals a playing card deck, right? Because you can correspond the different suits in a playing card deck to the suits in a tarot deck. So if you can read tarot, you can read with a deck of playing cards. Hearts are the suit of cups. Let's see, we have, what are the other ones? Spades for swords, diamonds for pentacles, and clubs for wands. Yeah, so there you go. I even have a video I made ages ago about how to win at poker using your knowledge of tarot. So you can even play card games and turn the odds in your favor, perhaps, by understanding not just the rules of the card game itself, but looking at your cards through the lens of tarot and understanding that card's meaning as well. So that's a video on my channel you can look up if you're interested. It's kind of a fun thing to try out and see if you do any better the next time you play cards. Let me see, what else do you guys have to say? Let's see. Maria has an interesting question. She said she's starting with all of this divination stuff and she has some doubts. How can this predict specific events? Well, kind of like what I said, it doesn't necessarily predict specific events. What tarot is usually doing is tapping into your subconscious. So you're bypassing your conscious mind, digging into your subconscious so that you can better understand your true desires and intentions. So by doing the reading, you're not so much predicting the future as you're changing it. When you're doing a reading, say you get a warning not to do something. Well, now the future is different because you have that warning, and how you're going to approach that situation will be different now that you've done that reading. So I don't think it necessarily predicts the future. I think it changes the future. But that's my 2 cents. Let me see. Let's see. Great comments, guys. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Let's see. I see a great comment here that says, I do daily rune readings as points of reflection throughout the day. It helps me to stay centered and calm. Yeah, doing a daily reading, whether that's through tarot or runes, I often do like a card of the day pull where I pull a card in the morning. And it really does, like, the comment says, help you stay calm and grounded. It kind of gives you a few nuggets of wisdom to consider throughout your day. And I find that very useful. I don't do it every day, but it can be a great practice, especially if you are starting out with runes or tarot and you want like a refresher on the rune meaning or the tarot card meaning. If you draw, one every day, it gives you that chance to like, oh, what does this mean again? You can look it up, you can think about it. Maybe you could even journal about it. So that's a great practice to do. So I thought we would start with runes. So let's talk a bit about runes. What are they? How are they used for divination? And then we'll talk a bit about tarot, what tarot is, how you use it for divination, and then we can kind of compare the 2 systems. Now, runes are something that, I've admitted I am a beginner on still. So I am not an expert in runes. I'm much more comfortable with tarot. I've been doing tarot for over a decade, but runes, I'm still a newbie. This is my set of runes here. And runes, as you can see, often they are a stone or a crystal. Sometimes they are pieces of wood with a symbol on them. Now, each symbol represents something, just as how in a tarot deck, each tarot card represents something, right? So you kind of have to learn the meanings. Now, it's going to be a bit easier in some ways with runes because there's a lot less of them. In tarot, you have 78 cards that you need to memorize and understand deeply. So with runes, what they are is they're basically an ancient alphabet. They're a writing system coming from Scandinavia. Now, there are multiple versions of this writing system. You have the Elder Futhark, and that consists of 24 symbols, and that was developed in the 2nd to the 8th century CE. And then after that, you have the Younger Futhark, which became prominent in around the 8th century, and the number of runes actually decreased. So it went from 24 to 16 symbols. But most rune sets you'll find are in the Elder Futhark system. So what these are originally was just an alphabet, just like our letters, right? They are a way to write something. So they didn't initially have a divinatory purpose. They were for writing. And you will find many archaeological artifacts with runes on them. And some of the most common places you'll see rune writings is on Rune Stones. Now, this thing can get tricky. When I say these types of rune stones, I'm not talking about our divination rune stones. I'm talking about large funerary stones that you will see in Scandinavia. And these functioned often as a kind of memorial where you would kind of write a bit about, so-and-so died protecting his homeland and was a great warrior, blah, 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 blah. So they were kind of a way to just talk about the deceased. So most interactions you'll find with historical runes are through these large rune stones that functioned as kind of funerary objects. And you can see them all over Scandinavia. I do have a video where I show you some of them from when I went to Sigtuna in Sweden. So I have that link down below in case you're curious. So the runes functioned as basically just an alphabet. However, there were some instances of runes being used for magic. There are a few spells and curses that incorporate runes, and this is historical. You can look these up. I do have a few videos about runes that I linked below if you are interested in learning more about runes and spell work. But in terms of divination, historically, runes were not used for that purpose. They did have seers in the ancient Norse society, but they didn't necessarily use runes. So that brings up the question, how did we get to this point, right? So how did we get to using runes for divination? There's only one account, and this comes from the Roman Tacitus, so take it with a grain of salt. And this is from the 1st century AD, and Tacitus said that he was, viewing kind of the Norse people, and that they would occasionally write symbols on wood fragments and then throw them and look at them, how they landed. So it's possible those symbols were what we view as modern day runes, or not. We really don't know. So that's the only historical instance we have of runes being used for divination. So much of what we know nowadays as runes as divination and the individual meanings of the runes, that's something that is very modern. So it's just good to know that. That doesn't necessarily mean it's invalid to work with runes as a divination method. It doesn't mean it's invalid to spend the time and effort in memorizing the meanings and researching them and going in depth with them. But I just want to mention that, that was never the original intention. They were used as a rating system predominantly, and then occasionally used for spell work. However, I do think studying the runes and doing divination with the runes can be a great tool for connecting with the Norse pantheon, with the Norse gods and goddesses, with the Norse cosmology, their philosophy. A lot of the rune meanings help us better understand what daily life was like for those people, and help us kind of figure out what are the similarities and differences in worldview, in morality. So that can be really powerful and a great way to enhance your study of Norse paganism. So just because it's not necessarily very historically accurate doesn't mean that it's not valuable for us modern day pagans. So I just wanted to mention that. Let me see what you guys have to say about those ideas. Let's see. Let me see here. Just checking through your comments. They're moving pretty quick. Let's see. Okay. I see a few of you guys talking about how words themselves are power and are magic. And that's true. When you think about the runes, their function as an alphabet, that doesn't mean that those words weren't powerful and magical. Especially if you go back to my ancient Egyptian pagan happy hour, I talk a lot about the hieroglyphs themselves as being magical symbols used not just as a writing system, but for magic. So that's very true. And even here in English, we have many words that are magical, like abracadabra, things like that, that have been used by historical magicians from, the medieval period on. So that's a good point. Let's see. Great questions, guys. Thank you. So one thing to consider then, so if the original intention of runes was not necessarily for divination, that doesn't mean it's unique, because I got something to tell you about tarot too. Tarot was not originally used for divination. Now, tarot has a bit of a different origin story. Now, when we think about tarot, the actual conception of a 78 card deck consisting of a major arcana and a minor arcana, that's a relatively new invention. We're talking about mid 1400s, developed primarily in northern Italy, with some inspiration from card decks, most likely from the Islamic Golden Age. But the first tarot deck doesn't really arrive until mid 1400s. I do have a copy of one of the earliest tarot decks, which is the Visconti Sforza. I highly recommend checking this out if you are interested in tarot, and especially tracing how the tarot cards have evolved and changed over time, because they've changed a lot, especially if you're using a deck like the Rider-Waite deck. It can be really neat to see how these cards have changed and evolved. So tarot basically started as a playing card game that was played among the wealthy. Just as how we play many card games now, people played card games back then. And it persisted that way as a playing card game called Taroki. You can learn it nowadays if you're interested. And it didn't actually become a divination method till around the 1700s. So it traveled throughout Europe. Here's a copy of the Marseille Deck, which is another very popular deck you might have seen around. So I believe this one is from the early 1700s, correct me if I'm wrong, from France. So the decks did definitely travel throughout Europe. This deck was made after the invention of woodblock printing, which is why it looks the way it looks, versus something like the Visconti Sforza, which there's only one copy and it's hand painted. The original is in most of the cards of the original are in the Morgan Greer Library in New York City. If you're interested, if you're ever in town, go check it out. So tarot itself isn't as old as runes, but the archetypes, when you try and think about what these archetypes are, these are ancient, right? So if you look at the major arcana, these main cards within the deck. So this is the 22 from Fool to the World. This section of the tarot deck, these represent sacred archetypes. And these archetypes have been manifested in so many different ways around the world for millennia, right? So when people say like, oh, tarot's from ancient Egypt, not really, but the archetypal manifestations kind of are. So it's the symbolism that's ancient, not the deck itself. Oh, I see we have a super chat from Peach. Thank you so much. I hope you're enjoying the Tarot Tuesday today. So that's something to keep in mind. So just like runes, tarot has an interesting origin story where it didn't necessarily start out with a very witchy, divinatory past, but it developed those attributes later on through the centuries. Now, tarot is really great for anyone who is a visual person, which is why I personally gravitate towards tarot. I have always loved art. I was an art history major in college, so the language of symbolism really speaks to me, which is why when I first started learning tarot, I knew automatically that like this system was perfect for me. I loved reading the symbols. I loved thinking about what these different symbols meant on kind of an archetypal level, in a historical context. There are many repeated symbols in a tarot deck. So it's kind of fun to trace the web of symbols within tarot. So it's a bit of a detective work, if I must say. So for someone out there who is interested in that, then yeah, tarot's the way to go. If you like art, especially if you like art history, if you like symbolism, if you read the Da Vinci Code back when it came out and you were like obsessed with it, then yes, tarot is 100% for you. Oh, and I see Nick is saying, what about numerology? Yes, if you are into numerology, tarot's for you. If you are interested in multiple occult systems, such as Kabbalah, the Golden Dawn, things like that, then yeah, tarot's definitely for you because it draws upon references from a wide array of occult systems, including Kabbalah, Golden Dawn, the Masons, and it also pulls in references from paganism, Judaism, Christianity. So there are a lot of influences here, all culminating in each individual card. And you can read each card like a painting, pull out each individual symbol, understand and study what it means, and then you kind of understand the card's meaning. But it is a bit nerdy because you have to spend a lot of time on, learning, understanding what each of these symbols represent. Now, runes are a bit more vague, right? The meanings of the runes aren't as specific as in tarot. I mean, part of that's just there's less runes and there's a lot more tarot cards, right? So you can get a little bit more detail when it comes to doing a tarot reading versus a rune reading. Let's see. Oh, I have a super chat from Craig asking if I've ever done the path working. You'll have to let me know more details about what you mean on path working. Do you mean in terms of, there's certain like tarot spreads that are considered path-working practices or rune spreads. So let me know what you mean in the comments, and I can answer that. But yeah, I've done a lot of inner path working. I'll say that. So when you look at tarot, you're really looking at an image here. And that at least gives you some clues, right? So you can look at a tarot card and decipher it. When you're looking at runes, you're looking at one symbol. So you're looking at basically a letter of the Elder Futhark alphabet. And you need to know what that letter means. And it might mean something like home. It might be something like prosperity. It might mean something like tribe. And you kind of have to figure out, well, how does that fit into the scenario that I'm in? How can that really answer my question here? So because runes are more vague, that doesn't necessarily mean they're not as powerful as tarot. I do think runes are really amazing tools for anyone who is wanting to connect with Norse paganism, because so much of the meanings of the runes and understanding and studying these meanings help you greater understand the Norse mindset. It's kind of like reading the Havamal. If you have a copy, it just gives you life lessons, it gives you thoughts, it gives you ideas, and it helps put you in a frame of mind that is a bit different from our modern viewpoints of the world. So in that way, it can be deeply beneficial. It can be deeply meditative, powerful, inspirational, but it's not going to be as specific, and it's going to be more difficult to relate to everyday things that are going on. So let me check your comments here. Maria is asking, when and why did tarot start to get connected with astrology and numerology? So it happened quite a bit later. The Rider-Waite deck was really the catalyst when you think about tarot shifting from these archetypal representations of a early Renaissance lifestyle to representing something more metaphysical that's wrapped up in Kabbalah, numerology, all of that kind of stuff. And that has to do with, the creators of the deck, White and Pamela Coleman Smith. They were deeply inspired by the Golden Dawn, which is a occult society, and they pulled a lot of teachings from that into the deck. So let me see if I can pull out like an easy example for you guys. Let me find one here while we're chatting. So yeah, it didn't happen until around early 1900s, I think 1910, when this deck was created. So here's a good example. Here's our nice optimistic Fool from the Rider-Waite deck, right? Represents new beginnings. We're about to embark on this new journey. He is clearly unprepared. Look at his bag. He's being warned by his loyal companion, the dog there. He's ignoring it, and he's about to just kind of fall off this cliff. But he's excited and looking forward to this new stage in life that's about to begin. The flower representing the purity here, the sun in the background representing his youthful vitality, and he's just taking this leap of faith. Very optimistic, right? Now, look at it from a historical context. So our first interpretation of the Fool is of a beggar, right? This is someone who has already fallen off the cliff. He's been ridiculed by his friends. Look, he's got feathers in his hair, suggesting he's been tarred and feathered. Doesn't have any pants, doesn't have shoes. This is a more real-world example of what happens when you jump into the unknown with no preparation and with no loyal friends to help you through the journey. So the older, more historic decks represent figures that you would see in a real-world context throughout your daily life. One of the theories that I really like about the earliest tarot decks is that they were inspired by the Italian Carnival. And in the Italian Carnival, people would wear certain masks and costumes, right, in Venice. And they would often represent these archetypes, the Fool, of course, being one of them. You travel a few centuries in the future to the Marseille, and our Fool is now a jester, still being ridiculed, like our Visconti Sforza. Look, his loyal companion in the Rider-Waite that's warning him is now ripping apart his pants. So it's a bit darker. It's a bit more realistic. It's a bit more warning based than the bright, optimistic, very esoteric, very spiritual Rider-Waite deck that we get in the 1900s. And the vast majority of tarot decks nowadays are very spiritual. They're based on these occult, esoteric ideas and concepts. So it really was an evolution from practical things and motifs and imagery you would see in daily life. A lot of the early decks focus on class structure, poverty. They focus on relations between the genders, a lot of Christian references in the early decks. And it's not till the Rider-Waite that we shift towards a bit more of a pagan mindset, and we start looking to the past for inspiration. There are, of course, a few exceptions to this, the High Priestess card being one of them, but it is a fairly new concept of tarot representing some of these more pagan, witchy, esoteric ideas. Great question, though. Let's see. Let me check your other questions here. Oh, I see. Madcap has a question. Did the Celts have a divination method of their own? So they have the Ohm writing system, which is really cool. You should definitely look into it and look into the Picts and who they were. There's a lot of great YouTube videos on this. Very mysterious. So these were kind of, the Picts were before the time of the Druids. But they had their own writing system, which is, I believe it's pronounced Ohm. Correct me if it's wrong, but it's spelled Ogham. And this writing system is made out of a line, and then there's kind of like hatch marks in it. And you read it like that. And this was a writing system, just like runes. Now, did they also, like the Norse, use their writing system for divination? No one knows. Unfortunately, we don't have any archaeological evidence of that. We do have inscriptions written in Ohm, but not necessarily anything that would indicate that that writing system was used for divination. Great comment, though. I wish we had more details on the ancient Celts. I mean, obviously, as someone who does follow a bit of a Celtic pagan path, I would love to learn more. Let me see here. Great comments. I see Graves has a comment here about finding a deck where you really like the pictures as it helps you remember the meanings. So that's going to be something that's really important if you are starting out with tarot. There are 78 cards. It's a lot of meanings to memorize, right? So you want to pick a deck that helps you learn these meanings. Now, there are a lot of modern decks which are gorgeous and beautiful and you might connect with, but they might be really hard to learn from. So I have many decks that I own for their beauty, and I might use from time to time, but I wouldn't ever use those decks to learn from. A lot of times modern decks don't really include a lot of that classic symbolism that's going to help you remember the card meanings. So what you're doing when you're learning tarot is you're learning a language of symbolism. So in the Rider-Waite deck, which is the deck I highly recommend people learn with, in this dictionary of symbols, you have a wide variety that you learn from. You learn what the symbolism of the sun and the moon means. You learn what the rose represents. You learn what the laurel wreath represents. You learn what the Sphinx represents. You learn the Hebrew letters. You learn all of these different symbols, and you see those symbols pop up again and again and again in different cards. There are about 5 cards with like laurel wreaths and like 3 cards with an orange feather on them. So you learn what these symbols represent, and you've built up this language of symbolism that helps you understand and interpret the card's meaning. That gets really tricky when you're working with a deck that doesn't have its own internal language of symbolism. How do you remember the card's meaning? Well, yes, you could just memorize it, and that would, work, but it would be more difficult to memorize it than knowing that language of symbolism, because especially once you know that language of symbolism, you're also primed to start studying other occult systems. So once you learn the language of symbolism in tarot, you're going to have a good chance of understanding the Kabbalah or the Golden Dawn or the Masonic symbols, or really any other occult system. So I highly recommend starting with the Rider-Waite deck if you're learning. But yes, of course, by all means, buy decks that you are personally drawn to. But when it comes to just getting through that process of learning the cards' meanings, it can be tricky. Not all decks are created equal. So one of the difficult things and one of the challenges that I really wanted to address when Jamie and I set about creating our own deck, the Key Tarot, is I wanted to stay true to a lot of that classic symbolism in tarot that I find is deeply spiritual and meaningful, but I wanted to modernize it for our contemporary era. So that's why you'll see we went with like photography, for example. So here's an example of our Wheel of Fortune card. I have a lot of the exact same symbols that you'll see in a Rider-Waite version of the Wheel of Fortune, such as the 4 fixed signs of the zodiac on the corners, the wheel in the center with the words tarot or rota, depending on which way you're reading it, and the Hebrew letters for Yahweh, the nice Wheel of the Year representation of the solstices and the equinoxes, the points in between, and the 4 alchemical symbols of sulfur, mercury, salt, and water, also representing the 4 elements. So this individual card has about 10 to 15 symbols within it. Once you understand that language of symbols, you can kind of have a deeper understanding of what the card is representing. But if you left that out and went with kind of a more fully contemporary version of the card's meaning, it might be trickier to memorize it. So that was always something that, I really wanted to work on, is how do I modernize these ancient and powerful symbols and archetypes? Oh, I see we have a super chat here from Craig asking, are there pictures for the runes? Well, there are some decks that look like tarot decks, but really they just have the runes on them, and then they do have pictures. I highly recommend those if you are working on learning the meanings of the runes, because that can help. Sometimes you need that visual representation. But when you look at most types of rune readings, it's just the stones or pieces of wood with the symbol. So it can be a little bit tricky to learn at first. A traditional flashcard method is honestly a great way to start with learning runes. Draw the symbol on one end, and then on the other side of the flashcard, write, several points about the meaning. Go through that. I mean, there's a lot less runes that you have to memorize, so you can start there. And then once you have that basic understanding of the rune meanings, you can dig deeper, and really look into what these meanings represent in the context of that particular time period, and how do you incorporate those meanings in our modern everyday lives. Great question there. Let's see. Ooh, Adam is asking, are there any tarot decks in Arabic? So it is interesting when you research the history of tarot, and there's a lot of theories that the earliest tarot decks were inspired by decks from the Islamic Golden Era. They didn't have tarot, but they looked quite a bit like playing card decks. So there were versions of decks in the Islamic world. Now, we don't have any proof that they were used for divination, as far as I believe, but that doesn't mean they weren't used for divination, just like with tarot. It wasn't its original intention, but that doesn't necessarily mean it wasn't used for that purpose. There are even some decks from China as well that might have been the inspiration for tarot cards and the tarot deck itself. But as far as I know, there weren't any specific decks from the Islamic world. I'd be interested to look into that more, though. That's a great question. Let's see. Just checking your thoughts and ideas here. Okay. So another thing you want to consider as well is, most decks, both, tarot decks as well as sets of runes, will come with a little guidebook. And that's a really good place to start, right? A guidebook is always useful. I mean, in our deck, the Key Tarot, I wrote with Jamie's help, our guidebook here. So I have all my personal interpretations and meanings of all the cards in the guidebook. But as I mentioned before, divination is a lifelong practice. So it's really meant to be just the starting point to help you understand the base meaning of the cards, but then you want to dig deeper, looking into what these symbols, what these ideas represent in an esoteric context. So that's always something to keep in mind. I see we have a super chat here. Thank you so much with a question. Ooh, an interesting question. It says, are there dangers in trying to learn tarot on one's own, like the risk of inviting negative or dark energies into one's life? Now, that depends on your belief on tarot, and everyone's a little bit different here. I don't think there's much risk when it comes to working with tarot. I think what you're really doing is you are digging out pieces of your subconscious and making them conscious so that you can actually understand what you really want in life. That itself can be scary, and maybe you're going to learn something about yourself that, isn't necessarily what you wanted to hear. That can be dangerous, perhaps. But when it comes to interacting with negative energies or negative forces, I don't necessarily worry about that, because I believe that the majority of the power that comes from tarot is our own internal power. Now, I do personally believe there's a little extra piece there. I do think that it adds on a little power by the mere fact that there have been centuries of people working with these ancient symbols and archetypes, and just the sheer mass effect of all of us projecting our energy onto this same set of imagery does leave a mark, an energetic signature that could be interacted with. However, in general, I wouldn't be concerned. Now, when you get a scary looking card like the Tower or the Devil, if it freaks you out, sometimes after I'm done with the reading, I'll put the Sun card on top of it just to kind of negate that negative energy. But keep in mind that when you're looking at a card like the Devil, a lot of that is just kind of playing around with Christian ideas, right? And it's not really about the devil. When you look at the devil card in a tarot deck, it's really about something completely different. It's about the need to take responsibility for your own negative habits and decisions. And it's a really empowering card. It warns us hey, we got to take control of our actions here before we go down this negative spiral. And it's about that. It's using this powerful kind of Christianized imagery to freak you out, but it's not about that. So I wouldn't worry too much about bringing in negative energy. Really, the only time I would worry about that is if you're conjuring spirits or entities, which is something I tend to not do personally, but I know many people do, and I would be concerned about that. But when it comes to tarot, I wouldn't worry about it. I never get spooky vibes when I'm using tarot. Let's see. I do see someone mentioning about cleansing decks. That is something that you can do, and I find that can help set you in the right mindset for a reading as well. And you can do that with your runes too. Some people do it before each reading. They cleanse it either, with smoke or water. There's many different ways to cleanse. And then you perform the reading, and you've kind of already spent this time, with your divinatory material, whether that's runes or tarot, focusing on releasing any negative energy within it. So that can be really helpful. I personally cleanse my decks great once in a while. I don't do it every day or between every reading, because that would be really intense, because I do tarot for a living. So I'd have to do it constantly. But it can be a great tool, especially if you're starting out and if you're a little worried about negative energies kind of being imparted on your deck. Let's see. Let me check your comments here. Ashley has a great thought here on the idea of kind of that negative energy. She says, if you come in with negative energy, you get negative energy. There isn't a spirituality that is dangerous if your intentions are pure. Your mind is very powerful. Yeah, I think that's the approach I take as well. I think whatever we're putting into it, we're going to get out of it. Kind of like the Wiccan rule of 3 a little bit, but it's more just a generalized idea of karma, right? If you're approaching the reading with positive intentions, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get positive cards, but it does mean that you're not going to be bringing in this type of scary negative force or anything like that. Let's see. Oh, I see. Corin here is asking if it's not good to do readings for yourself or rune casting for yourself. I think it's totally fine to do readings or rune castings for yourself. In fact, you should totally do it because it's a great way to practice. Now, there is a benefit to getting a reading from someone else, in that a lot of times we get stuck in our own, mind process and thoughts and ideas. And sometimes it's good to get an outsider objective opinion. So yeah, it's definitely good to get readings from other people from time to time, but I highly recommend doing readings for yourself, especially if you are starting out, because it's great practice, so don't worry about that. Let's see. Another question here. I see someone asking about shuffling. So shuffling is a great way to impart your energy on the deck as well. Now, there are different types of shuffling, and kind of even with runes, how you kind of shuffle the runes. But in starting with tarot, I just do a classic playing card shuffle like that. And then after I shuffle it a couple times, like you would a deck of playing cards, I cut the deck a few times. So say I'm doing a reading for myself, I will just cut the deck and keep cutting the deck, thinking about what question I want to ask the deck. So I have that kind of in my mind. I'm focusing in on this question, and I'm using my intuition to tell me when I should stop. Now, tarot, like runes, uses not just a historical understanding of symbolism or a learned understanding of the card's meaning. It is also using our inner power, our inner intuition, right? And this is one of the ways that I do that. So I'll cut the deck until I feel that now's a good time to stop. The deck is telling me now I want to stop. Then I draw the cards. Now, that intuitive pull, everyone feels differently. For me, personally, I feel it as almost like a little kick in the stomach. Not like a painful kick, but like a little, slightly uncomfortable sensation. And it tells me now is the time to stop and start turning over the cards. So that's how I do my shuffling. Now, doing it in a classic bridge shuffle like that guarantees that I'm not going to get any reversals, right? So I don't read reversals in my readings. So a reversal is, if it shows up upside down. But I'm of the belief that each tarot card has both a positive and a negative aspect, and I use my intuition to tell me which direction I'm going to take the interpretation in. So that's another way that I use my intuition. The third way I use my intuition is when I flip over the card, I spend a second thinking about, are any symbols in particular drawing my attention? So what symbol I see first or feel connected to first might help guide my interpretation and pulling it in a bit of a more positive or negative direction. So even though I know the meaning of the card, I'm also interpreting it based on not just the inherent meaning, but also my intuitive feelings when I am pulling this card. So let me see here. Let me check your questions. You guys are on a roll tonight. Let me see. Okay, let's see. Rose is asking, hi, I would love to see videos of you doing readings. I don't feel comfortable watching other people's readings because they don't always come from a pagan perspective. So I have plenty of videos where I've done readings, like casual readings for people on the Key Taro Instagram. So you can check that out. Jamie and I do those usually once a month. We'll do like a monthly reading where we'll, answer people's questions, things like that. So you can check that out. I do have a ton of tarot videos on my YouTube channel. I probably have like 15 to 20. So if you just type out tarot, I do show you a couple different reading styles and methods. I usually don't do full readings on YouTube because that's how I make an income. So I do have a link below if you are interested in just kind of getting a reading from me. But I do have like short little readings that you can kind of see on the Key Tarot Instagram and in some of my YouTube videos as well. Ashley is asking, do I draw them off the top when I'm doing a reading, or do I intuitively choose them? So I intuitively choose when to stop cutting the deck, but then I draw them for the top. So if I'm doing a 3-card reading, I would just, draw card 1, draw card 2, and 3 from there on. Alan is asking, if you get a used deck of tarot cards from someone, should you cleanse the cards before you use them? Yeah, I think if you're getting a deck from someone, it is good to at least do that first initial cleansing so that you're kind of releasing any of that previous energy on the cards. And the more you handle, your own cards, you're kind of imbuing it with your own energy. Some readers are a bit picky about letting others touch their cards. Since the vast majority of readings I do are like online through like Zoom, I don't really have to worry about that. But times that I've gone to like a festival and I've done like a ton of readings for people, maybe I've done like 20 readings in one day, I'll definitely cleanse the cards afterwards to kind of release all that energy from other people. Great question. Let's see. So I think we have 2 minutes left, which is crazy. This hour has flown by. I'd love to hear in the comments if you like me doing these kind of divination tarot Tuesdays on my channel, or if you'd rather, I go back to Instagram and start doing these on Instagram. Let me know what you prefer. And also a couple announcements. We do still have the giveaway going on for my deck. So if you are interested, I have the link for that on the Key Tarot Instagram, so you can check that out. I believe we're going to be announcing the winner soon in the next couple of days. We don't have too many decks left in this order before we have to get more. So if you are interested in getting a copy of the deck, I do have the link down below. This is what they look like. This is the back, gold sides, and this is what they look like. There is a full flip through of the deck on the Key Tarot Instagram and the YouTube. So there's a separate YouTube channel if you want to see what each individual card looks like. You can check that out. And of course, I'm here for any of your tarot questions. I do offer tarot lessons. If any of you are interested in learning tarot, right now in my schedule, I have spots for, I think, 2 more students before I have to close enrollment. So if you are interested in a one-on-one lesson with me, I have the link down below. You can check that out. Feel free to reach me for any questions, any thoughts, any ideas. And thank you guys so much for joining me. This has been really fun. I know I was talking kind of like a mile a minute, but there's just so much to discuss when it comes to runes and tarot. And I hope this was a fun introduction for you. Again, I do have a bunch of videos linked in the description down below. If you want to learn more about runes and tarot, definitely check that out. And I will see you this Friday for Pagan Happy Hour. We are going to be doing a Lunasad party since that is the next big Sabbath coming up. So stay tuned for that, and I'll talk to you all later. Bye.